Well, my name is Jean Morgan, and today's date is June 2nd, 2009, and we're at the home of Dave Ferguson in Louisville, and we're doing an interview of him for the Louisville Historical Commission. Um, Dave tells me he was born December 10th, 1928, at 1100 Jefferson in Louisville at his aunt's house. And the townsfolk a lot of times call him Fergie, so he's going to start by telling us how he got his nickname and then maybe another little story about nicknames.
Okay. Well, my dad was naturally Bill Ferguson, and they call my grandpa Fergie. He got, and then it passed from my grandpa Rob down to my dad, and so they called him Fergie, and naturally pretty soon it comes down the line to you. It seems like it's just kind of hereditary. Just the nickname goes down, but almost everybody called me Fergie. But we had a guy in town, Peggy Smeltzer, and anyhow, Peg was always sat at the show steps there, and then he'd go in and out of the pool hall, and he worked with us on construction and different things, and he was great with the kids. He used to manage and coach all junior Legion baseball and stuff like that. But Peggy was the kind of guy that everybody had to have a nickname, and he had a nickname for every young person that walked the streets of Louisville. And I don't care who you are. You asked him, would say, "Hey, what did Peggy used to call you?" And somebody will give you some kind of a name. Now, most everybody calls me Fergie. A couple guys call me Meatloaf. Now, how in the heck did you get the nickname Meatloaf? Well, we were working on construction down at the Remington Arms plant. This was in the 40s, 43, 44, or something like that. And Peggy Smeltzer was working with us down there, Peggy and a few other guys. Norio Ferrari and another guy they called Ham Fraus and stuff like that. We were all working down there. There were 6 of us young bucks working down on construction, and we always used to eat together, and we were working like 5 in the afternoon till 4 in the morning, something like 10, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week down there. And my mom used to fix my lunch naturally, and my mom was the type of lady that if she made you one sandwich, and if she made you 6, they were all the same. She never changed. She wouldn't give you a couple of ham, a couple of cheese, a couple of jellies or something. So this one particular day, we were all sitting there eating lunch, and I opened up the sandwich and started eating it. And Peggy Smeltzer says, "What the heck you eating?" I said, "A meatloaf sandwich." So pretty soon I opened another. Well, in those days, working the kind of way we did, I had a pretty good appetite, and there were 6 of them in there. So by the end of the 6th sandwich, every time I opened up a new sandwich, what kind of sandwich is that one? Meatloaf. So at the end of the day, I had 6 sandwiches and the nickname Meatloaf. And for the rest of all the time that Peggy was alive after that, every time he saw me, he called me Meatloaf. Nothing different. Mm-hmm. And a few of them, Johnny Ray in town is one of the few that still calls me that. But there's not too many of them that even that even remembers that nickname. But that's where I picked up that nickname. So but Peg had a nickname for everybody, and he never forgot it, and he never made a miscue when he called you. If he gave you a nickname, and he didn't see you for 3 years, he'd call you by that. He was phenomenal with that nickname stuff. Yeah, Peggy, he was quite of a guy with this, and but anyhow. Not everybody got their nicknames like that. Some of them got them through running around with guys or from their older brothers or dads or something. But the nicknames came around that way, and they kind of stick. And now they call a couple of my younger ones Fergie. So just pass on down the line now, and then they'll pass theirs on some to, hopefully, if they have boys, to down the line to them too.
But it was mostly for the boys, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, Peggy didn't fool much around with the girls. He wasn't a ladies' man too much. He was strictly more or less a man's person. But that's where a lot of us got our nicknames from Peg.
Now I know that in the first interview that we did, you brought us up to about the 50s with your stories.
Okay.
So if you could remember where you left off and continue from there. Then
well, let's see. I think we were talking about back in those days. Dottie and I got married in the 50s when I was still going to school on the GI Bill up at Greeley, and eventually I almost was getting ready to I did graduate up there, and then I used what GI Bill I had left, and I went out and finally burned it up using it on my master's. And then 20 years later, I finally decided to come back and get it. I think I told a story in there about getting a job at Rockwell and stuff like that. So back in 1951, when they started building the plant up there, I was still in school, but when I got out, they were going to send me to a school, and I never got cleared in time to go to the school. So they says, well, you got to wait. And then during this waiting period, Dottie and I lived in a little old 2-room shack up there on Main Street across from the fire hall. No heat. We had to use wood to cook with, or we had, I think, like a little stove. I can't remember, but it was, we did have electricity, no water. We had to carry water. We had an outhouse. And then after about a year in that place, then we moved down to right on the corner. If you come up Front Street, heading north, and you have to make a left to keep from going into that house. That's where Dottie and I lived for. And we started out down there. It belonged to the Electronicos, and her and I, this one Electronico lady decided to let us rent it. They charged us, I think it was $15 a month. And then we had to pay gas and lights, which was negligible in those days. Anyhow, we stayed there, and we raised, well, we had at least 5 kids, I think, while we were down that neighborhood. And we only had 1 bedroom, and then they had another bedroom where they had storage. And then eventually, as our family kept growing and growing and growing, they'd give us a little piece of the bedroom. Then we'd add another one. They'd move some of their junk out, and we'd add a little more space. Pretty soon, we had the whole bedroom. And what we did, if we had it in there, we had bunk beds in there. And I built a huge dresser with about 10, 12 drawers on it, and each kid had a set of drawers. And eventually, that's what happened. Then we decided that they started a couple of developments in town, Bella Vista, and then one up behind the high school up there, well, the middle school now. Anyhow, we were real good friends with Glenn Steinbaugh and them, so Glenn talked us into building a house down here. So my father-in-law and I, and to help a couple of my cousins, I traded labor with them and a couple other guys. We built this entire house down here. And it cost us very, very little money in labor. And I think when we got finished, I had a GI loan of like $13,500. And I owed old man Steinbaugh about $1,500. So for about $15,000, we built this house here. And then we didn't have any furniture. We had old junky hand-me-down furniture up at the other end, which eventually we bought off of the Electronicos. They had all of this furniture up there. They didn't know what to do with it, so I think Dot and I gave them a couple $100. So we had all this junky furniture. Well, she didn't want to move it down here. So her sister was teaching school down in Colorado Springs, and she borrowed some money from the credit union down there because Dottie and I had X amount of money with the GI, and then we owed Herman Steinbaugh, so we couldn't really go borrow any more money. So anyhow, Roy, she went and borrowed a couple thousand for us, and we completely furnished the house with all new furniture and stuff, kingpins. And then in the meantime, I came up with a job with Rocky Flats, and I worked out there about 14 years with the government.
And what year would that be then?
Oh, I started in 53, and then I went into teaching in 60, I think it was 65 or 66. I decided to go into teaching. Gene Caranci was working down at Cole Junior High. He was a assistant principal down there, and he kept bugging. We were roommates up in Greeley, and later on we got married about the same time. We had kids, about the same time, and we were very, very good friends. And he kept wanting me to go back into teaching. Well, teaching, they weren't making too much money. But I was getting tired of working at Rocky Flats, too. I got tired of not being able to see the sun. And there was always something like missing. You train for one thing and you do something else, even though it was fairly related to what I was doing out at the flats out there. So anyhow, he called me up one day. It was in September, and this was in the 60s. And I tried several times to go back into teaching, and for some reason I couldn't get by the front door with this guy down there. He was the head of the industrial ed department at Denver Public Schools. Well, they started school in 1966 or 7, and there wasn't anybody available to take that class down in 5 Points. And so Gene called me up at Rocky Flats, said, "Hey, we need a teacher down here real bad." He says, "I think you'll get in with no strings attached." So I called Dot from the plant down here, and I called her. I said, "What do you think?" She said, "Well, you've been wanting to do it. If you decide you want to do it, do it." I said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to go down there. They offered me the job. I'm going to take it. No ifs, ands, or buts." So that was cool. So anyhow, we went out. I went down that afternoon, and I walked in, and you swear to God, I was this guy's long lost son he hadn't seen forever. And I never could get in his door before. Every time I tried, there just wasn't any room, and he wouldn't even, hardly listen to my story why I wanted to get back into teaching. Anyhow, he hired me. I went back to Rocky Flats, and then I told him the day that I was going down for the interview, and he says, "Well, don't worry about it. We won't penalize you or anything." He says, "Whenever you have to leave to go to school," I said, "Well, this was like on a Monday, or Monday, I guess it was. They started with school has been in session about 3 or 4 days, and then this was the following Monday. So anyhow, they went ahead and we went down, and so I told them I'm going to terminate on Friday. So I had to go on Friday. I went through a real tough physical out at Rocky Flats, and I passed it, and then they let me go. And then I was the number one man in my division out there on the plant site. And so I had a real good job out there, and I was making good money, but like a fool, I could decide I want to do something different. So anyhow, I went down, and everything was cool, and they said, you got to go take your physical. I said, this has got to be a piece of cake compared to what I had just gone through. I went down, took the physical, and guess what? At the end of the day, this is on Friday now. He says, at the end of the day, he said, "Mr. Ferguson," I said, "I'm sorry, we can't hire you." I said, "What's your problem?" He says, "Well, the Denver Public Schools has a ruling that if you're over 200 pounds, that we can't hire you." I says, "I'm a perfectly healthy person." He says, "No." He says, "That's our ruling." And I says, "God," I said, "I just quit a hell of a job out there, man, making good money and all this, and now you tell me I can't go to work down here?" I said, "What do I got to weigh?" He says, "You got to be under 200. I says, "I'll see you Monday morning." So he says, "Fine." So I came home, and I didn't eat or drink or do anything but exercise for 3 days. I'd get up, and I'd had a couple sweatsuits on. I would run around the block, come back in. I'd lie on the floor. My daughter, my two youngest kids would cover me up, and then they'd lay there, and I'd sweat as much as I could. And then I'd go down. I went down, even down to a spa down in North Denver, and I sat in the sauna for 2 or 3 hours. And so anyhow, we went through all this. Monday morning, I went down there and weighed in, and I weighed 195 pounds.
And how much had you lost?
I had lost 15 pounds.
In 3 days?
Yeah, in less than 3 days.
It was like you were in the wrestling again.
Yeah, worse than wrestling. Worse than wrestling. So anyhow, by God, they said they had to hire me, so they hired me, and from then on, I stayed with the Denver Public Schools right down in that particular area down there. And we had some great times down there. And let's see, we were talking about the 50s too. I don't know if anybody's ever told you this particular story, but back in my younger days, all of the young guys about my age that were in their early 20s and something, we all joined the fire department. And we were out with
here in town.
Right here in town. It's been a local thing. It's never had any it's been always an all volunteer. And so they talked me in when I moved back into town. They talked me into joining the fire department. So we joined it, and that was our center of life there. We had a lot of activities around that. We had a lot of fun. And we did a lot of crazy things. We had a lot of crazy parties. But there was this one group of men that went fishing one time, and they went fishing up in Wyoming up there at I forget the name of the lake up there. But anyhow, there were 6 of them in the airplane, and coming back, they were flying back on a Sunday night, and they never heard from them. They left. Seminole was the name of the lake up there where they were fishing up in Wyoming. So anyhow, about 8 o'clock at night, Gene called me. He says, "Hey," he says, "we got to go out to Jefferson Airport." He says, "Bull Moose and all these guys are missing, and they don't know what happened to the airplane. He says they left Seminole at such and such a time, and they haven't heard. They should have been back a long time ago. So we went out there, and there were a bunch of volunteers out there, and what they started doing was manning airplanes. They had a pilot and usually one or two spotters in each airplane. The spotters were all firemen. Anyhow, I went out there, and when I was getting ready to go out there, I can remember I put on a pair of hiking boots, and I took a bunch of matches with me. And in those days, I might have, I might have smoked. I don't remember. No, I guess I wasn't even smoking in those days. Anyhow, Dot says, "What are you going to do with all those matches?" I said, "You never know. You might need a match for something." So we went out there, and I sat out there, and I sat out there. About 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, pretty soon I was the only person left. Everybody had been assigned but me. So pretty soon they came in and said, "Oh, Mr. Ferguson, he says, we got a plane for you." He says, "This is the last plane we're going to send out." So they sent me out with these two guys, and the name of the pilot was kind of ironic. His name was Billy Mitchell, same as the WW2 general that we had that did a lot of bombing and stuff over around Japan and stuff. Anyhow, he was our pilot. So what we were looking for was a white airplane, and our job was to fly over, get in behind the front range here, and we knew we were going to fly north along there because they figured if they had gone down, it would have been somewhere in that area. So we flew north to there and went all the way up to Laramie. And then we landed at Laramie, up in their airport up there. And then Sue Grosso was the wife of one of them. She was up there, and her and I were sitting there talking while they were refueling the plane and stuff. And we didn't have nothing to eat. They didn't have anything in that airport. No pop, no candy, no nothing. So anyhow, we take off again, and but this time we had two pilots up there. One was a young kid, about 18 years old. Then we had Billy Mitchell. So when we left Laramie, Billy Mitchell sitting in the co-pilot seat, and this young buck is flying the airplane. So I sit behind them. See, they had a big, like a double seat back there. So we're coming back, and pretty soon I told this young kid, I said, "You know something? There's something white over against the side of that mountain." I said, "It's probably snow," because this was like in April. So there were patches of snow, and it was tough looking for what we were looking for. So anyhow, we went back, and we made a circle, and he came back, and he came in too low, and he hit the trees. So we came down, went through the trees, and cracked the airplane up. So, and I was sitting in the back, and of course I had a seatbelt on. The pilot was over here, and he was knocked out, and this Billy Mitchell, who should have been the pilot, was over there, and he was really knocked down. He had a great big cut in his head. He was bleeding. So anyhow, I worked myself out of the airplane. I was a little bit worried. We were on kind of a rock slide. I was a little bit worried about maybe the dang thing catching fire. So eventually I got both of these guys out. And Billy Mitchell was completely unconscious. The other kid just had a big knot on his head. Of course, he was knocked out. We got him too. And I told the kid, I said, "Now, kid," I said, "you go down there, go down to the bottom of this rock slide, and I want you to look around, see what's down there, see what kind of terrain's down there, so we'll know what's going on." And this was about 9 o'clock in the morning. So anyhow, I sent the kid down, and I waited about 10, 11. The kid didn't come back. So this pilot, he was bleeding. What I'd done, I had taken off I had a T-shirt underneath, and I had taken off, and I made bandages, and I bandaged up his head, and I got the bleeding stopped. And I said, "Well, we got to get the hell out of this place." So because I said, nobody knows where we're at and what's going on. So little by little, I worked him down the hill, and I got him down, and he'd come to, and he'd pass out, and he'd come to. This went on all day long, day long. And I could see the other planes. They were searching in the canyon, to be honest, like one mountain over. And we were over there. Of course, they didn't have any idea that our plane was down or anything else. So they kept going over there, and I kept working him down. I don't know how many. We traveled quite a distance. Anyhow, it was starting to get dark, and we had a little creek we had to cross back and forth, and I was taking him around this one corner, and I had him kind of behind me, and he slipped and fell in the dang water. And now this is April, and water's colder than Hades. So I said, "Well, Fergie, I'm going to put those matches to use." That Dorothy Ann wanted to know why the heck I had matches with me. So anyhow, I took and I built a fire, and this kid, naturally, we didn't have I didn't even have a very heavy coat on myself, but I did have the T-shirt and the shirt on. anyhow, we got the kid there, and what I started doing is I started taking off his clothes, and I had a huge bonfire, and I would take off his clothes, and I'd dry them out, and I'd take my clothes off and put them on him. So pretty soon I'm sitting out there in a pair of skivvies, and I got him all bundled up, and he's nice and warm, and eventually I get his clothes all dried out. Now it's starting to get fairly close, fairly close to dark. And pretty soon an airplane flies over, and I got this huge bonfire going. So the plane kind of like stops, like almost like above me, and they turn the motors on and off, and then they make the plane go like this. In other words, they're letting me know that they had sighted me. Well, that was Sue Grosso, the same lady, and her husband was on that same on the other airplane that had gone down. See, Charlie used to own the Primrose down here. He owned the Primrose, and he used to own by the White Front down there too. Right. Yeah. Well, anyhow, Charlie was on that other plane. So anyhow, Sue saw this, and then pretty soon a helicopter came by, and he stopped right above me, and he says, "Hey," he says, "we know you're down here, and all this and that," and he says, "Hang in there, keep that fire going." He says, "We're coming to get you." So they, anyhow, they sent when they found out about this whole thing, they sent a rescue party, but they had to go way up on the road, and then they had to walk back this way. It was the easiest way to follow. They followed almost where my plane the plane had gone down. They followed the trail that way. They were going to come in and get me and take me back out of that place. So anyhow, I built this big, huge fire, and I got the pilot dry, but he was pretty well out of it. And when they asked me too, I said, "How's the pilot?" I said, "Not worth the damn." I said, "You better get him out of here." I said, "I don't think he'll make the night." So anyhow, I'm sitting out there, and I found a can. And I rinsed it out, a beer can, and I was giving water. That's all we had, water. So I was feeding the pilot water and me water. And I remember I was sitting out there, and it got pretty dark about this time of night. And I had a huge bonfire, but I was sitting on a rock out there in the creek. Pretty soon somebody said, "Hey," and I threw that can, I bet you 50 feet in the air, scared the living hell out of me. And it was the pilot of the helicopter had landed up above. He says, "I couldn't get down any closer." He said, "I had to land in the saddle up there," and then he walked down about a half a mile. He says, "We're going to get you out of here." I says, "Best news I've heard today." And so, anyhow, I couldn't figure out why all of a sudden, you could see the airplanes all of a sudden over in this area. Then about 5 o'clock at night, you could see several airplanes starting to move over into our canyon. Couldn't figure out what the deal was. What had happened, I sent the kid down, and when I got down below, I put an arrow. I drew some markings in the snow where the plane was and which direction I had headed, and I printed it in the snow pretty good. So he went down, what happened, the kid went down, went to the left, got lost, came back. Well, he was still a little, he didn't have it, the elevator wasn't going all the way up on him that particular day. So anyhow, he did see my signs, he saw my writing, so he says he took off the same direction I did. Well, when we came, and I kept following the stream, because I knew the stream was going to take me out of that place. As long as it headed down, and we were getting out of that joint. So anyhow, the kid, he took across this meadow. I followed the stream and kind of jockeyed around. Well, he went straight across the meadow, and he got ahead of me. And he comes out down below, and somebody picks him up on the road down there, and he started talking about an airplane and all this and that. And the police picked him up. They thought he was kind of a nut or something. So after they started interrogating him and he started telling him, that he was on his plane and from Broomfield and who he was with and all this and that. That's when they switched to church. They started calling the planes up above. He says, "Move over to the next canyon. We got another plane down over here." So anyhow, the pilot says, "Help me, we get this young man upstairs." So we did. He and I worked him up to the timber, got him up to the helicopter. And he says, "Mr. Ferguson, I got some good news and I got some bad news." And I said, "Well, let's hear it. What do you got going?" He says, "We're going to get Billy out of here." And he says, I'm going to fly him to Fort Collins. Now, the bad news is, he says, two-man helicopter.
I knew that one was going to happen.
He says, and guess what? He says, "I don't think you need to ride." And I said, "I'll be damned if I'm going to stand on the outside of this thing all the way to Fort Collins, So he says, He says, "Just keep your bonfire going." He says, "I know where you're at." But he says, "Move your bonfire up here on the flats, up here by the plains, see, because we just left it burn down there. It wasn't going to go anywhere anyhow with the way I had the fire. So he says, I built a brand new bonfire up there and I got it going. He says, now you keep that bonfire going because I'll use it to bring me back in to find you. That's fine, we'll do that. So I went ahead and I built the bonfire and I sat out there and pretty soon it's get 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Finally I said, oh, to hell with that. This guy is not coming back for me. So what I did, I found there was a great big log there, and I pulled a log over close to my fire. And I cuddled up between the log and the fire, and I fell asleep. About 5 o'clock in the morning, something hot kind of splashed over me. There were a bunch of bats diving at the fire. And when they dive and hit the fire, then the flames would go, and it was not flames, it was just mostly embers. And that by that time, it was about 5 o'clock in the morning. It was still kind of a little bit dark out there. I said, well, I'm getting the heck out of this place. So I took off and I started walking. I walked for, I don't know, 2-3 hours or better. And finally I came to this river. And I wasn't sure. I thought I was on the North Fork of the Poudre, but here I was on the main Poudre River. So finally I said, well, I got to wade across that baby to get on that highway over there. So I waded across and it was up about to my waist. I got over the other side and I came out and I was starting to walk down. Here comes a Jeep around the corner. And it was Jim Hernander. He was a dentist here in town, and his brother was the pilot of the other airplane. And he comes up and he says, where in the hell have you been? We've been looking for you all night long. I said, I've been on the top of that mountain. He said, well, we found your fire. And he said, put it pretty well, had it put out. And he said, so we knew you were heading down. So they said, there's no sense of following you. So they decided to turn around and go back out. And there was a road not too real far from where the plane had gone down. But I didn't know that. So anyhow, they had come down. They set up a headquarters down there for this whole search operation going up and down the Poudre Canyon. And they were coming up out of there, and they put me in the Jeep, and they take me down to this place. And there's some policemen and stuff down there, and rangers and whatever. So they heard the story, and then they told me about the kid finally getting his way out of down there. So the cops stuck me in the police car and they're taking me to Fort Collins. So I'm in the police car. My coat's full of burn marks. It looks like you shot it with some black paint. My clothes were full of blood. And I had a couple days shaved now, and my hair wasn't combed. I didn't really give a dang about my hair. I looked like hell anyhow. I remember we walked into the police station. And as I started to walk in, people moved away from me. I guess they thought they had some kind of convicted killer or whatever there, because I really looked like a mess. So finally, when they found out who I was and what had happened, then the cops radioed the Louisville cops. Then Long Jack and Chooch, Gene Caranci, came down and picked up Dot, and he said, he's up in Fort Collins. He's okay. So then the cops, I told him, I said, I haven't eaten for a couple, 2-3 days here. I said, I'm kind of hungry. He says, well, there's a nice little restaurant down the street. And so I went down there, and I came walking into this restaurant, and now I know how a person of different color feels when they go into a white. They saw me coming in nasty. I would look like Hades. And I came in, and I sat down at the bar, and I ordered some food, and the guy was reading the newspaper, and he looked at me for a little while, and I guess he figured I wasn't, possibly as bad as I looked. He started talking about the plane crash, and I said, yeah, I know it. I said, I just came off of one of those airplanes up there. Well, when he found out, he bought me breakfast. I got a free breakfast out of the guy. Then about after, I noticed the guy came out of there, and I was sitting up in front of the courthouse there. Pretty soon, Dot and Gene and Long Jack come up, picked me up, took me home. They got me back home, and I was taking off all my clothes, and I lifted up my shirt, and I was full of wood ticks. I think between my daughter and my wife, they took off 30 or 40 wood ticks. Anyhow, when that was all said and done, then we went ahead and they put me in for Fireman of the Year and Hero of the Year for the state of Colorado. And Trudy Currigan, he was the mayor's wife that time. Yes. We heard of Currigan Hall. Yep. Well, Trudy's the gal that made the presentations. And I think they gave me $200 war bonds or something like that. But I was 19, I think it was 67. I was a hero of the year for the state of Colorado.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that
Yeah.
story.
And then
Huge
I have to tell you,
adventure.
we'll go back to 5 points and stuff like that now.
Did they find the 6 on the plane?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I guess I'll finish the story. Anyhow, it was kind of crazy up there. I thought I was kind of losing my mind. I swore to God that I could hear voices. And every now and then I'd stop and I'd holler real loud. And I don't know, it was the guys that was trailing me. Of course, they wouldn't have been trailing me during the day because they didn't know about me. I kept telling them, I said, I swear to God, I hear voices somewhere, but it seemed like it was up and over on the other side. And anyhow, when I got out and they decided that, I said, I think they're up in that neighborhood somewhere. I said, I swear to God, I heard voices. But I said, I could have been crazy myself. I said, you know. So anyhow, they went up and they started searching around in a little bit different area than they were searching. And they finally spotted the airplane. Then they went in there and they had a similar deal. And there were 6 of them on the plane. 3 were killed and 3 got out. Chuck Denavelis was killed. Jack Hernandez, the pilot, and Dixie Elrod. He owned Wagon Wheel.
Oh, yes, yes.
You've heard of Dixie. Dwayne Elrod is one of his sons. And then Chuck Grosso got out. Al Romano, Bull Moose, he was another, and Jack DiGiacomo.
And these are all Louisville.
Yeah, they're all 6 Louisville guys. They were all, so 3 of them got out, 3 of them didn't. And they rescued them on like about a Wednesday. And I think it was the next day or maybe one more day after that, and then they had one heck of a snowstorm up there. And if that would have hit, there's no way they'd ever got those guys out because they were hanging. Number one, they were doing what you're supposed to do. If your plane is down, you stay with your plane, you know. And they did basically that, and they were kind of using the plane a little bit for shelter and stuff like that. But anyhow, they finally got those 3 out, and then they eventually went in and got the bodies out. And then we had a mass funeral the following Saturday. We had three funerals going at the same time. We buried 2 here in Louisville, and we buried Chuck Denavelis over in Lafayette. And one of the 2 places, I can't remember where it was, this pole, I'll tell you why they didn't come back and get me too. Finally, I met the pilot, the helicopter guy too. And the reason they didn't come back and pick me up like he said he was going to, the kid that I had carried out had a great big gash, 100 and some stitches in his head. And when they got him down to Fort Collins, they didn't have the facilities and the equipment to take care of this type of head trauma. So then they shuffled him down to, I think it was St. Joe's or St. Anthony's or someplace down there, and they took him on this helicopter. Well, by the time he had taken him to Fort Collins and then back down there and came back over to get some gas and stuff, he says, that guy knows what he's doing up there. He's a mountain man. He says, hell, he's not going to have any serious problems. And he said, I'll go get him tomorrow morning. Well, by that time he got around to looking for me, I was out of that hole. So anyhow, and then I happened to meet the pilot, the kid that was the pilot, this Billy Mitchell. Mm-hmm. And he was all bandaged up, and he had 100 stitches in his head. And I think he lost part of the vision of one eye, where his head hit against the windshield of the dashboard of the airplane. And then the other kid told me what happened to him. He got down there and he didn't do like I told him. I said, just go down and find out what's going on down at the end of this rock line. He said he started wandering around. Then he got lost. And then he came back, read my sign, followed my arrows, and then he eventually got out. And they told me when he got down there, they said he wasn't too rational. They thought he was some kook, down there. And finally they started putting the story together. He happened to mention a name or something. And they said, yeah, well, he says he's up there. He's one of the firemen from Louisville. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, then they started saying, hey, this guy is for real. So then they start looking for us. So anyhow, and then the last I heard of Billy Mitchell, now he's somewhere in this area. He went back. He was flying a group called the Flying Tigers back in Illinois or someplace. He couldn't pass the Colorado physical. But back there, he was flying freight, stuff like that. And he came back, and I ran into somebody. They were having a party one night, and they got to talking about this Billy Mitchell and something like that. I said, their name is familiar, and he's in the area, or at least he was, and I think he's still alive, because he was a little bit younger than I was. But anyhow, this one guy said, yeah, he's going to get him. We were going to get together at some time, but it never ever materialized. So I don't know if Billy Mitchell's still around or what,
Still
but
time.
whatever. So
Yeah, we should look him up. It'd
yeah,
be
like
good
I said, I
reunion.
hadn't seen him since the days of the funeral.
It'd be a good reunion, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So today, all you had was a bunch of matches that your wife
Matt,
told
you know
to
another
bring.
thing I had too. I had a pocket full of change, pocket full of money.
What in the world did you do with
Well,
that?
I think I'd been to the dog track or something. But anyhow, I had a pocket full of money from either the bug dust,
And $2 bills.
yeah, stuff like that, and a bunch of matches. That's all I had. And I was dying. I said I'd have given that whole pocket full of money
Yeah.
to give me a package of Rolaids or something. Man, I was really hurting.
Yeah. Right.
And then, of course, after a while, that even left me. But
Well,
then I want to tell you another story about. This is back when Gene and I were teaching down at Cole Junior High.
so about what year would that be?
This is the year that Martin Luther got shot in 67, 68, maybe 69, somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't remember exactly what year it was. But anyhow, we were down at 32nd and Humboldt, which is the heart of black downtown Denver.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we were at Cole and Manual. But anyhow, Gene and I were there at Cole. And
Gene
Caranci, yeah. And he was an assistant principal there at Cole.
Okay.
Anyhow, my room was back off of 32nd Avenue. Across 32nd Avenue, they had a bunch of slums and stuff. In those days, it wasn't the nicest place in the world. It's not that Martin Luther King Boulevard and stuff that they got going through there now. They had tenements, and in those tenements, you could get anything from A to Z. It didn't matter what you wanted or what you were looking for. It was there, any shape or form. And so, the kids that I worked with back in that area weren't the cream of the crop of the city of Denver. Believe me, I used to call them the cream of the crap all the time. But anyhow,
basis, though.
but anyhow, I had some pretty good ones through the couple of years there, and one of them was, ironically, his name was Oscar Hood, and he was a Hood. I had him in the 9th grade, and then he left there, and they were starting to have some riots or something in Chicago, and Oscar went to Chicago. Then Oscar came back again when Martin Luther got shot. We were we were down there at the school, and we were wondering what the heck we were going to do with all these kids and stuff. Because in those days, we were busing white kids from Cherry Creek up to Cole Junior High.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I went in the back room and opened up my room and taken off my coat and putting all my junk away. Pretty soon, off of 32nd Avenue, there comes about 15 guys. They were carrying everything. They had baseball bats, they had shotguns, they had pistols, they had rifles, you name it. And Oscar and 3 or 4 other kids that I had in class were in this particular group. They come in the room and says, Mr. Ferguson, he says, we're going to shut the school down. I said, Oscar, I said, I think that's a darn good idea. I said, but I'll tell you what, let me get my coat and my stuff, and I said, we'll lock this place and we'll get the heck out of here. So I said, okay, so I got all my junk, and we're coming up the hall. There's Fergie walking up with these little valise, and up on the other end were the Gene and the principal and the assistant principal in the school. Gene was a coordinator down there. And the 3 of them were standing up there at the end of the hall. And they were watching me coming up with this group of guys. So we got up to them, and I told the principal, I said, you know what? I says, these gentlemen want to shut the school down. And I says, I think it's a pretty good idea. What do you think? And he said, well, I'll tell you what. He says, have them give us a half an hour or even an hour. He says, we got to get all these white kids out of this area and get them back home. And they said, we'll close the school down. So I says, okay with you? Oh, yeah, that's fine, Mr. Ferguson. So anyhow, about an hour later, the buses came in, and we loaded them in, and some of them we were putting on cars. Some of the teachers were loading up, sticking 5, 6 kids in the car, and they were heading for Cherokee. Anyhow, we got all the white kids out, and then the rest of the kids living in the area and stuff. So we sent them all home, and then we told Oscar and Emily, well, you guys can have her now. We're going to leave. And so we went home, and about 10:30 in the morning, Gene and I were sitting down at Blue Parrot, drinking coffee royals with double shots of tequila, getting our nerves straightened out after that little ordeal. And then down there, when we were there, for over a year after they shot Martin Luther down there, we started having a lot of problems. They had the Black Berets, the Black Panthers, and the Brown Berets. The Brown Berets were the Latino group down there, and the Black Berets were the black members down there.
So what did the kids do with that school that day then?
We shut it. They just shut it down, and then they left.
And everybody left.
Yeah, as soon as we.
They didn't wreck anything.
No, they didn't touch a thing. Didn't touch a thing. No. They just ran us out of the school, and that was it. And we locked her up and got the heck out of there. And like I said, we had these two different groups. So right after this particular episode, when we went back in school, then they provided us with 4 Denver detectives.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of strange. We had a big black gentleman. We had one that was Latino. We had an Irishman and an Italian. They were like Marine Corps, paratroopers, Navy SEALs, Marine Raiders, 4 of them, and they were Cracker Jacks. And those guys stayed with us 4 or 5 months down there until things settled down. We had a white principal. We got rid of the white principal. We brought in a black principal, and within a month, everything settled down.
Now, did we have problems like that in Louisville?
No, there were no blacks up here. No blacks.
How about any other racial problems?
No.
I know they weren't blacks, but
no, we've never had any serious racial problems
but
anywhere.
wasn't there KKK in this town?
Oh, that was way before.
That was
back during when my mom and them were young people. Yeah, we had KKKs, and they had rumors of certain guys in town like they were members of the KKK. I won't mention their names. But my mom and dad always insisted a couple of them here in town were KKK members, and they would burn crosses.
And this would be like in the 20s and the 30s?
Yeah, maybe? back in the 20s, not in the 30s, probably back in the 20s.
Okay.
Maybe even a little earlier than that. But, it would be in the 20s, because my mom was born in the early 1900s, and my dad too. And they would burn the crosses on the thing, and a lot of it was religious and stuff like that.
So it was anti-Catholic?
Anti-Semitic. Not so much Semitic, because there were no Jews, there were no blacks here.
Uh-huh.
We had the Chicano element, which they weren't from Mexico. They were born and raised in Louisville, Colorado, just like I was. And but anyhow, they did have these kind of guys for a while, and then it kind of died down later on. But outside of that, but then my mom says she can remember seeing horse riders with the white hoods and stuff like that. When she was just a little girl.
They were going after minority people then?
Oh.
But this town was full of minorities, so who were they?
Well, you'd be hard to target any kind of minority. Yeah. Probably maybe more religion, the Catholic religion and stuff. Okay. A lot of Catholics here. We had a lot of from Middle Europe. They were Catholics.
Okay.
In Italy and stuff like that. But it wasn't strong, and like down south with the black people and stuff like that. No.
So our town was real peaceful.
Yeah, it was pretty safe. Louisville was a pretty safe place to grow up. And I think they said we've had one murder here in town, and that was a sheriff that got shot by somebody. Yeah. That was the only one that, and nothing, no real serious crimes or anything like that.
So what do you think about any of the changes that you've seen in this town?
I think they're all good.
Do you?
Yeah. I grew up in a town, and you could throw a rock across it. And when I was a kid growing up, we used to swim in a rat hole up there, which is on the northwest corner of town. There was a Goodhue ditch and a great big hole, that rat hole. We used to swim in the mini ditch down here at the creek. Yeah. We had our own basketball courts we'd make on the garages and vacant lots. We made our own baseball. We had our own little leagues. We used to play. If you lived from Pine Street this way, you were on the southern team. Pine Street that way, you're on the northern team. So we had football, basketball, baseball, softball. As the season progressed, and then we had our own little leagues and stuff like that. We had competition. We played every Saturday, north versus the south.
So this was organized stuff, or was it just
No, kids. We organized it ourselves. Okay. We had a team, and there'd be older brothers and stuff on the team, and then when they grew up or leave or something, it just kept going until the war came along. That North and South kind of disappeared when the war came along, and we started doing different things. And then we started getting a little bit older, but that was the end. But we had North and South here for a long time. Yeah, the older guys in town, like Clarence Martell and some of the guys used to play on the northern team, and if you owned a certain piece of equipment, then you were the center, or another piece of equipment, you were the quarterback.
The catcher, or whatever you meant.
We used to get our baseballs. We'd go down and watch the baseball down there. Somebody hit a home run. We'd run to get the baseball, and that's the way we got our baseballs and stuff. Then we'd inherit the equipment from older brothers and cousins and relatives and stuff like that. Pass it down through the family, and when you got out of that stage, and you'd pass it down to a younger one.
So when stuff lasted a long time.
Oh yeah, we had the same. I think in our family we had a football helmet and a pair of shoulder pads. So we passed those all the way down until the north-south died.
Now, was there anything east and west of the railroad tracks? Was there any? What did you think of the people on the east of the railroad tracks? Was there any problem? Or
no, they were never any
everybody's
problems.
just happy in their own
Yeah,
neighborhoods.
a lot of those homes down there were used by the miners and some of the little cabins and stuff down there and stuff. But no, we didn't have any problems like that. We got along real good. You always had a rivalry between Louisville and Lafayette. Then again, when the war came along, maybe even a little bit after the war, all that kind of died down. Even that rivalry. And then they made Centaurus High School, combined the two teams, and made one heck of a football team by combining Louisville and Lafayette.
Well, but there were problems when they combined that school, weren't there? With the Louisville and Lafayette kids kind of.
Well, the transition went pretty good because our number 3 son was in the first graduating class at Centaurus. 1 and 2 graduated out of the Louisville High School. 3, 4, 5, and 6 out of Centaurus. But the kids got along good. They got along good with Lafayette and Louisville and stuff once they combined the school. And there might have been a little bit of animosity and problems, when they first moved the two groups together. But pretty soon they split up and they just became unified. They just became one school, one team, whatever. Yeah.
So after you finished working, then what have you been involved in town here? And
Who, me?
When did you quit your jobs?
No, I quit. I retired.
Was your teaching job at Cole then?
I taught in Cole till. No, they went to a 4-year system.
Yes.
And when they went to the 4-year system, I taught in the shops. Then for years I worked with dropout kids, strictly dropout kids.
It was Cole Junior High.
It was Cole Junior High when I was there. And we started a program called CWE. And there were 4 target schools in Denver. We had Horseman, Cole, Maury, and Smiley, I think was. Anyhow, 4 schools, 4 different areas. And then we started these work programs with these kids, 9th grade kids that were dropping out of school.
Okay.
We brought them back into a separate program, kept them in school half a day. Then we had them working a half a day, and then they got full credit. And we worked with some tough kids. We had some tough kids. We ran that program for 17 years. We started out with 4 of us, and we ended up, we were in every junior high school in the city of Denver, and some of them had duplicate programs, and then we expanded it into the 10th grade in high school. So there was continuity from the 9th grade through the 10th grade. And then once they got out there, then they could go into the voc ed programs, business ed and DEC and distributive ed and stuff like that at the high school, home ec, stuff like that. And that excellent program. It worked for everybody. And we had results with that program, and it was phenomenal. I'll give you an example. I hate to use me all the time, but anyhow, we had 2 kids that belonged to what they call the Brown Berets. They're 15 years old. One of them went to school 1 or 2 days in his 8th grade year, and the other one went maybe 2 or 3 days. Not much difference between the 2. So they bring these 2 kids in, they put them in my program. I get them a job, put them out to work. At that year, one of them missed 1 day, and I think it was a death in the family, and another kid missed a half a day. So they went from practically nothing to a full-time school. And one of the kids, every year we used to have down at the City Hall, Civic Center downtown Denver, we'd have all the vocational classes, high school and junior high. We'd have a great big banquet down there. We had some big speakers. The governor used to come, the mayor, and some of the congressmen and stuff. We'd invite them to these banquets, and a lot of the big business leaders around the city of Denver. These were quite the thing. Anyhow, they needed somebody to give the vocation, invocation. So one of these 2 kids that I had, I told him, I said, I need somebody to give the invocation. I said, Tommy, you're it. So he got together. He did originally go to parochial school down there, so he went over and he got that back with his sister. He wrote the invocation, and he gave that invocation about 3,500 people. So I mean, just stories like this with these kids. But I also had a kid that committed the first crime in the city of Denver. Two of them committed the first crime. I forget what year it was, but anyhow, it was New Year's Eve, and they decided to break into the liquor store and steal a couple bottles of whiskey, go celebrate. So they broke into the liquor store, got 2 bottles of whiskey, broke out of the liquor store, and everything was cool. Well, after they got outside, they decided, hey, we don't have any pop for Chaser. So they broke back into the liquor store, stole a couple bottles of pop, and they come out and the cops caught them. So these two kids committed the first crime in the city of Denver down there. And anyhow, I got a call from down there. They were at juvenile hall. Mr. Ferguson, we need you. We're in serious trouble down there. I got down there and I said, what's your problem? Well, they told me about breaking in a liquor store, stealing the whiskey, breaking back in, stealing the pop. And I said, what's your problem? He said, we need some cigarettes. I said, anybody as stupid as you two guys aren't going to smoke till you get out of this joint. I turned around and left, and they weren't too happy with Mr. Ferguson. But anyhow, that was the first crime in the city of Denver. I thought that was kind of unique, too.
Norm, you've done a lot of really
We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of
stuff.
fun down there. We had kids with gun. There was a kid one time. I had a couple in the family. Sometimes you get kids in the program. There'd be 8 kids in the family. By the time the 8th kid got schooled, they'd all come through my program. Mm-hmm. The older sister or brother start, and then the next one, the next one, the next one. They just keep it going like that.
Institution.
Yeah. And then I ran all the work programs for Cole Junior High. And then when I got over to Manual, I ran all the work programs over there. So I worked with all kinds of good kids, bad kids. And I got a lot of different jobs. And I knew practically every black person in the city of Denver down there, I think. And it was fun working with these kids, and we did a lot of good.
So looking back on that, how do you feel about that career?
Well, one thing when I went into teaching, I knew where I was going, and I knew what I was going to be working with. And then when I had a chance, when we split, and went to the high school, I had a chance. I could have gone to any high school in the city of Denver. I could have picked out a white school, nice elite Thomas Jefferson or Washington or something like that. But I elected to go 3 blocks down the street, and I went down to Manual. Then I finished my last 10 years at Manual High School. Then I ran a couple of work programs down there. Then I filled in for an industrial ed teacher when he took a sabbatical to get his doctorate. And then I ended up back in the shops where I originally started. I was teaching woodwork and drafting.
And what year did you retire?
I retired in 1991.
91?
91.
That was just a few years back.
Oh, yeah. I've been out for quite a while. You don't think of it. That's about 18 years.
Yesterday.
91. Yeah.
Yesterday.
But it was a great life.
Oh, my.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of laughs.
And a lot of helping people, too.
Yeah. We had a lot of good times there. Yeah, I spent a lot of time around here. My kids were always involved, so I was always with Little Leagues. I put 100 years in with the Boy Scouts. All 5 of my sons are Eagles.
Oh, my.
And a lot of times in with Joe Carnival and George G. Brown and all these, quite a few different guys around town with the Boy Scouts. I think I was involved 25 years with Troop 69, and then about another 5 or 10 years I was with the Boulder with the Eagle Scout. I was the Eagle Scout County counselor for the Long Peak Counselor here, Louisville, Lafayette, Erie.
So did you continue to do that after you retired?
Oh yeah, I did that up until I don't know. Probably I stayed in it about 5 years after Joe Carnival died. The troop kind of went to pot, and then I shouldn't say that, but it wasn't as active a group as we had like before, because we had a real active group. We used to go bumming with those kids all over. We go 10 days summer camps and winter camps and fall camp outs and camp outs out to the lake. We had a real active troop. Swimming. We used to go to take them over to CU. We escorted over there at CU at all the football games and stuff like that. We had a real active troop.
Now, did you meet over there at that little, the Rod and Reel Club?
We met up at the fire hall.
Oh,
the fire hall.
so I think they still meet at the Rod and Reel Club.
Well, they Elks. Well, I don't know about that. You mean the Louisville Rod and Gun Club?
Yeah.
That's at the Elks they meet.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the Louisville Rod and Gun Club meets
Yeah,
too.
but the Boy Scouts, I think, meet in their old building up there on what is it, South Street?
You mean at Art
At the
Center?
railroad tracks. No, on the other side of the tracks.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
I just wondered.
Yeah, I haven't been that involved with him, so but
Okay.
no, our main headquarters was up in number 1 fire station down on Main Street down there.
Right.
Yeah, we had that, and then we had Joe Carnival owned all those old buildings down on Front Street down there, from where that Mexican restaurant is. All those buildings going across the street and going north. He owned 4 or 5 buildings in there, and we used to store all of our scout stuff down there. And we had a bus, and we painted it all up, and we used to go all over with that bus and stuff.
Well, I know you've been involved a long time in the historic commission.
I had a few years, yeah.
A few? Like you're an institution there.
Yeah, but it's fun. I've always kind of liked to help people, so whatever. And then with a crew like I had, you get involved in everything. If it was in scouts, and I went with campouts with girls, with my daughter going up in the campouts, and with the scouting and cheerleading and pom-poms, and we had wrestling matches, you name it, we've been there.
Now, does your family still live in town here?
Number 1 son lives in Broomfield, and number 2 son's in El Paso, Texas.
What are their names?
Dan is number 1, and he lives in Broomfield. He has 2 girls. Dave's number 2. He lives down in El Paso. He has a boy and a girl. Dean is number 3. He lives over in Frederick, and he has 2 girls. And then Dora is number 4. She's up on the hill. She has 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. Then Doug, he lives down here, Dutch Creek, about 3 blocks from here. In fact, Doug is in Iraq right now.
Oh, is he?
He's over in Iraq. He's with, oh God, I can't think of it, with the Army over there. He's doing work with the Army group over there. Engineers. The School of Engineers. He's with the Army School, Army Corps of Engineers. I'll get around to it. He's been over there about 2 months. And he's got about another 10 or 11 months to go. But he's over there. He was working on and setting up computers, and he's in Baghdad, and they're setting up and getting ready to move out of the green zone out of Baghdad. They're going to move out to the Baghdad airport. And then what he's doing now, they're going in and they're moving all the computers and stuff, taking them out the airport, setting them up. They're going back and forth. He's supposed to be out of there by the end of this month, and then they'll be full-time at the Baghdad airport.
And that would be your youngest child?
No, that's number 4. Let's see, number 4 son. No, there's a younger one than Doug.
Okay.
And Doug like I said, he lives down here, 2 boys and a girl. And Dale lives up my mom's house up above, and he has a son, and then his wife has, let's see, we have 14 grandkids, 6 great granddaughters, and 2 great-grandsons. And then I call the rest of them adopted. Now, some of my kids are recycled, is what I call them, if people know what I'm talking about. I now have we have 17 more adopted grandkids and great-grandkids. So we have a slug of them.
So do you have big family parties?
Oh, yeah. Well, we have, like Mother's Day, Memorial, we have down here. Christmas Eve, the whole crew comes down
you
here.
have to close the street down, don't you?
No, I got a pretty good-sized backyard. Yeah, we have down there, and we had a little thing we built fires with. And back in the old days, we always used to hold all the parties down here when we were younger. We had the rec room downstairs, and we had a floor, linoleum floor down there, and I had a bar down there. And all the young bucks, the Crancies, all of us that ran around together, we used to have New Year's Eve down here. We'd throw a party you couldn't believe down here, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. And then we always used it like that. And then we used to have parties like Memorial Days and stuff. Most of them we came down here because we had the big patio and stuff like that. And I used to build a fire in a wheelbarrow out there. We had a lot of good times. And Gene Crancy used to come down and play the piano, and we'd have everybody in singing, and we had some great times.